Okay.
Okay. Good start.
Yeah, let's go.
Okay.
Morning, everyone.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Resolve Summit 2024. My name's Rebecca Bryant. I'm the Chief Executive of Resolve. This is our first of a series of webinars to talk about antisocial behaviour over the coming days. It had been in tune with ASB Awareness Week, but as you know, we've had to postpone ASB Awareness Week because of the general election, and that's due to take place on the 18th of November now instead. There's a lot of you on the call who are our members, so welcome. And those of you who are new to Resolve, welcome too. The more the merrier when we're talking about antisocial behaviour. Today's session is focusing on the importance of partnership. We all know that antisocial behaviour can't be tackled by one sole agency, and that it is actually a collective response that's required to support people to become safer, more resilient communities. And we've got a great lineup of speakers today. We're going to be starting off with A2 Dominion, who are going to talk about the early intervention group. Followed by Berkshire Housing Association, who are going to talk about the importance of partnership within the borders. And then we're going to have British Transport Police talking about the work that they do in relation to partnership. So what we're going to do is we're going to invite each speaker to come and join the screen, perhaps share a presentation and talk to you about their projects. And then towards the end, we'll have a session of question and answers where you can ask any of our speakers any questions you may like, or put me to test, as usually happens, and I'll do my very best to answer your questions. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our first speaker, Holly Aberley. She's from A2 Dominion. They're a housing provider in London and South England. And Holly joined A2 Dominion in 2022 as a neighbourhood officer, and she's quickly moved up to become a dedicated ASB team and antisocial behaviour resolution specialist. Holly plays a pivotal role in the early intervention group, a collaborative approach between A2 Dominion and Spelthorne Police to raise and resolve ASB issues before they escalate. So over to you, Holly. Hopefully you'll be able to get the IT to work.
Thank you. That's fine. Thank you, Rebecca. I'm just going to share my screen. Can you see that?
Yes, we can see that. Thank you.
Great stuff. Okay, so we have a group which is the early intervention group. I'm just going to show you a few slides of what I've put together. Sorry. Oh, yep. Okay, so how did it start? So in January 2022, we set up the early intervention group, as there are 4,451 A2 Dominion homes, which is nearly 85% of the properties within Spelthorne. Although we did have other multi-agency meetings such as CHARM, TC&G in the borough, residents were being referred to these once the antisocial behaviour had been escalated. So how does it work? So the early intervention group works by identifying problems very early on and to allow partnership working between A2 Dominion and Spelthorne Police. This is to put in intervention work and strategies to prevent them from escalating. It is used for highlighting emerging hotspot areas, building relationships with the police, and tackling the more complex cases that do not have other agencies involved. This would also allow the group to safeguard residents, both victims and perpetrators. So the meetings are monthly, and the structure is having an agenda which contains the nominations sent to our ASB specialist, ASP assistant, which is Judy. These have been either nominated by a member of A2 Dominion or the police. And at the end of the meeting, we always have an AOB section where the floor is open to discuss anything that may not have been nominated or on the agenda. The AOB is also for quick sharing information and free flow of information between A2 Dominion and the police, meaning we don't necessarily have to wait for police disclosures and things like that. Okay, so the success of the early intervention group. So as you can see on the table, before the group was set up, we had 37 nominations, but it took us 218 days to resolve them. Now our target is 90%. 90 days, for the cases to be resolved. And then, as you can see, as the early intervention group started and then carried on throughout the years, the number of investigations may have gone up, but the days to resolve has reduced significantly. We've also have a statement from Daniel Burrell, which is a ASB case builder for Surrey Police, which we work very closely with. So he has put, the early intervention group has been invaluable in identifying problems at the earliest time, so intervention work can be put in to prevent or escalate a problem. It is a partnership working group between the police and A2D, where both parties bring people to the table to discuss. We have had an amazing success with problem solving individuals, holding each other to taskings and planning how we move forward. We use it for the partnership working, how we both can learn from mistakes in the past to process and quickly as possible. We can also show how we are supporting the tenant and putting them at the centre of a wraparound care and going to multi-agency meetings already with a plan. We have used them effectively for managing a situation waiting for criminal procedures to be completed, getting paperwork completed, in a position to proceed with evictions, injunctions and further tenancy actions. It has also helped us in criminal prosecutions and intelligence gathering with partnership intelligence sharing forms completed. It also highlights specific people and places where an information sharing protocol will be required. And we have a case study here of a case where we worked very closely with Spelthorne Police. So one of our estates in Spelthorne had experienced ongoing issues with antisocial behaviour for over 10 years. Things seemed to be getting better, then they'd rear their head again. The estate had a bad reputation and residents would mention issues relating to drugs, noise and violence. However, due to the fear of repercussions, they did not want to make formal reports or actively support our investigations. So recognising the negative cycle, the ASB specialist and the local S&T were determined to address the issues for the benefit of our customers and the community. Through building a strong relationship with the local policing team by sharing intelligence and agreeing a joint approach, the specialist was able to arrange regular police presence in the area and even carried out house-to-house inquiries with them. This event eventually led to enough information to allow the police to conduct a warrant and search the property. The search was very productive, with evidence of drugs being grown, used and supplied from the property. Following the very successful warrant, the specialist attended court with the police and was called as a witness. After a long drawn-out hearing, a full closure order was awarded and the property was secured. Later that week, the notice of seeking possession was served, and before it could be referred to court, the resident decided to hand back the property, which is a win-win. Although we had strong grounds to be awarded possession of the property, the welfare of the perpetrator was still at the forefront. Support was offered and referrals made, and now the ex-resident is on the right track. And that's it from me. Thank you.
Oh, thank you very much, Holly. I think it's really interesting to talk about different types of partnership meetings. Obviously, as you know, this whole session is focused on partnership and recognising that each different agency have different tools and powers that are available to them. And it's for us to decide as practitioners which agency is best to lead. And then recognising that obviously information exchange is really, really important in that. And one of the things that Resolve are lobbying for at the moment is a single information exchange protocol that's signed off nationally that we can all use regardless of where we practice. So it would be the same across all 43 police force areas and for all relevant agencies. One of the issues that it's been highlighted by our members to us as a barrier is always information exchange, and it's really disappointing considering the Crime Disorder Act has been around since 1998, and Section 115 of the Act, which says that you should share information to reduce crime and disorder, which obviously includes ASB, has been around for such a long time. So having these kind of meetings where you can talk about individuals, looking at the type of strategy that you need to take in relation to each individual case, rather than having a one size fits all, and recognising that each agency who's taking part can use their various tools and powers to resolve the problem. So the case example that you used around closure power, but through the local authority or the police force, but equally then it would be the housing provider who would look at taking enforcement action through tenancy removal. So thank you very much for that, Holly. I know that there'll be lots of questions for you but we'll leave those to the end if that's okay.
Absolutely.
So thank you. So my next speaker is Michelle Meldrum. She's from Berwickshire Housing Association, lives in the northeast but works up in Scotland. We've just been talking about that, and who was she supporting last night for the football? It was England, and wasn't that a relief that we got over the line? Rather stressful for everybody, I'm sure, on this call watching it. So Michelle is going to talk a little bit about the Scottish Borders Housing Network. It comprises of 4 leading Scottish Borders registered social landlords. The network offers joint support programmes, optimising resources, increasing the quality and accessibility of services to tenants across the region. Michelle is the Chief Executive of Berwickshire Housing Association with over 27 years experience working in the social housing sector. She's actively engaged in members and in a number of national and local partnerships, working with a range of organisations, including Scottish Government, CIH Scotland, Scottish Foundation of Housing Associations, the Scottish Housing Regulator, and other social landlords across Scotland, and Social Borders Council. So over to you, Michelle. Thank you.
Thanks, Rebecca, and thank you for the opportunity to share some reflections today around the importance of partnerships within antisocial behaviour. My presentation's not going to be quite as specific as Holly's. It's going to really just share some of my own personal experience of being involved in various community safety and domestic abuse partnerships over the years. Before I get into that, just a little bit about Berwickshire, just 30 seconds. Our vision is to realise the power of home, which I think kind of expresses our involvement in areas like antisocial behaviour and domestic abuse. Very much our focus is around not just bricks and mortar, but all of the other things that goes into supporting our customers. We've got 55 direct colleagues, so relatively small because we do outsource all of our repairs and maintenance, our asset delivery and our grounds maintenance. We have just under 2,000 homes spread across Berwickshire, so quite geographically spread and often quite isolated. We do have a wind farm as our commercial subsidiary, which is quite interesting, and that brings us around £400,000 a year profit. Our overall turnover is around £11 million, and we do engage, as Rebecca has said there, in all kind of national and local partnerships where appropriate, involving CIH Scotland, Scottish Federation of Housing Associations, the Scottish Government, the regulator. But more locally, we do engage in all relevant community partnerships also, particularly around community safety, public protection, violence against women and girls, employability, and so on. So that's just a little bit about the organisation. Because we've got quite a short time frame today, I'm just going to, like I say, share some general thoughts on the importance of partnerships within ASB. And I'm just going to take each letter of the word partnership and just talk about another related word. So none of this is rocket science, but if we can get these things working well within our partnerships, it is so powerful. So for the first P, I've chose pooling resources. I think one of the benefits of working closely with other organisations is that you can pool resources, you can share skills, you can share experience, you can share knowledge, equipment, and so on. And if you consider the resources available within one organisation working in isolation, so one local authority, one RSL, one police force, one support service, they are all relatively stretched at the moment, particularly given the cost pressures that face us all. If you then compare what that could look like by working together and pooling resources and all of those things I've referenced, There is so much opportunity to increase overall capacity and effectiveness when dealing with antisocial behaviour, domestic abuse and other community safety matters. So P is for pooling resources. For A, I've gone for amplifying the impact. So as has been mentioned, we know that no single agency can address all of the drivers of antisocial behaviour, and that effective partnership working is critical to sustaining safer communities and successfully dealing with antisocial behaviour as part of that. Effective partnership working delivers better outcomes because it benefits from all the things I've referenced earlier in the first point. It also benefits any victims involved, as they should only have to share their story and explain their needs once rather than multiple times, which is not helpful to them and can contribute, particularly in domestic abuse cases, to further trauma. I know this doesn't always happen, but effective partnership working means that this can happen, and there's a great opportunity within that. I think the saying around the sum of the parts wraps up this point quite well. So the impact and outcomes achieved from effective partnership working will always outweigh those that can be achieved by a single organisation. So A is for amplifying the impact. Moving on to R, I've chosen root cause. Working together with other organisations and sharing information, knowledge, etc. will enable you to understand the root cause of the antisocial behaviour or other issue in a more timely and robust manner. Of course, if we don't understand the root cause, it's then difficult to identify the most appropriate response and appropriate intervention to ensure sustained successful outcomes. So it's really, really important to spend time with partners to identify root cause. Otherwise, you could go down a pathway that's really unproductive. T is for trust. So, we know that in any partnership or relationship, trust is the bedrock of a great team. That's why spending quality time with key partner agencies is very important. Time not just in meetings, but time getting to know one another and building up real trust, where there's psychological safety, honest and open communication, showing appreciation for one another, as well as giving constructive negative feedback where improvement is required. At the most basic level of trust, partners should be relied upon to play their part, do what they say they'll do by keeping any promises or agreements they've made. All really important when dealing with antisocial behaviour. So T is for trust. For N, I've chosen networks. Each organisation and person within an organisation will have access to their own networks, organisationally and individually. And if you bring together those networks and share that access to information, skills, expertise, it's immediately broadened and expanded significantly. And there are so many benefits of effective networking in the context of antisocial behaviour, including exchange of ideas and experience, access to new information, gaining a new perspective or a new solution, getting an answer to a tricky question, getting a more timely response. It can also lead to new collaborations that can benefit organisations and their customers. And that's just a few of the benefits of effective networking and pooled networking. E, so E is for efficient and effective. So again, one of the potential benefits of partnership working within an ASB is that any response to a particular issue will be more effective and more efficient by working together. Linked to some of the points I've already made around sharing resources, skills, knowledge, ideas, these support a more timely and effective response with interventions that will target the root cause of the matter to ensure those successful and sustainable outcomes. If one individual agency attempts to deal with a complex antisocial behaviour situation in isolation, you can just imagine the cost, time and effort required, and it's highly unlikely that they will achieve the desired outcome. When that burden is shared across the key partnership, with each agency clear about their role within the bigger plan and clear about their responsibilities, the intervention and the outcome is much more efficient and much more effective for all involved. R is for reliable, so obviously linked heavily to trust. Successful partnerships require everyone involved to be reliable, dependable, consistent, making sure they do what they say they'll do and aligning their actions with words. Reliability creates a sense of security and stability across the partnership and allows the agencies to strengthen their relationships and the effectiveness of what they deliver together. If organisations are reliable, it inspires confidence in others. It enables them to rely on that organisation without doubt or apprehension. Key elements of building reliability are around being clear and concise, active listening, active questioning, being honest and following through on commitments. All partner agencies are a cog in the bigger wheel, each relying on the next. So reliability in the context of partnerships and antisocial behaviour is very, very important. You remove one cog and potentially the wheel stops moving. So R is for reliability. S is for stronger communities. So ultimately, this is what all community partners are collectively seeking to achieve. This is the ultimate outcome. Effective partnerships working together to address ASB in a timely manner is a key part of building stronger communities. An important element of this is engaging with our customers and the wider community base. Engaging with customers and building strong relationships with them is central to any partnership approach seeking to address antisocial behaviour successfully. Quite often, the critical information required to successfully deal with antisocial behaviour will come from within the community. Therefore, having strong, trustworthy relationships with them is so important. If these relationships with customers aren't strong, it's highly unlikely some customers will have the confidence to share information freely with key agencies. And I think this is where the role for RSLs, this is where the role of the housing officer comes in to the fore. If they can build up strong levels of trust with their customers, customers are more likely to discuss any local intelligence with them than they are perhaps sharing with the police or local authority. H, I've gone for humility in partnerships. This is key to all involved agencies working together towards a common cause. It's no good different partner agencies working towards different outcomes unless, of course, they are agreed with the partnership. It may mean that some organisations have to show humility by adjusting their preferred approach, but in the spirit of working together, the bigger common goal, that might be the right thing to do. Humility in this partnership context may also mean that another agency may be better placed to take the lead and any egos will need to disappear. It also means that agencies need to listen to one another, feed back to one another, be prepared to ask for help and support, and acknowledge mistakes. All of this requires a certain degree of humility. Humility is such an important attribute in partnerships. It can help connect organisations and individuals, it can foster creativity, and it can encourage accountability. Humility is an attribute which is free of arrogance and ego. Being humble means you tend to think of others more and consider how your actions will affect others. It acknowledges others may have a better idea or a better way of doing things, and humility welcomes differences and even celebrates them. So you can see how all of those factors around humility, how those play into the importance of partnership working. Information sharing, I think, is key in all of this too. So timely sharing of the right information from one agency to another and collectively across community safety partnerships is, as I've said, a critical factor to achieving successful outcomes. Clearly, this needs to be done in the right way to keep everyone safe in terms of data sharing and data protection. But we know we have information sharing protocols which can help achieve this. I'm sure you're all aware of this, but information protocols or agreements are basically a structured agreed guidance for sharing certain information between two or more organisations. The information should be necessary to the situation, proportionate, relevant, adequate, accurate, timely and secure. It should also only be shared with those individuals who need it. I've worked across some organisations and partnerships who have refused to share information because of GDPR, when in reality GDPR is not usually a barrier to information sharing. It's normally culture or individual personalities, and the information sharing agreements, if set up appropriately, can get around these things. Each agency potentially holds one or two pieces of the jigsaw. So when this is shared across the partnership, all of a sudden you can see the bigger picture, which informs decision making, helps to determine the most effective interventions and approach to dealing with a particular situation. So just to wrap up, and moving on to the last P, I've chosen the word power to show the power of partnerships. And I think the power of partnerships is realised by taking into account and implementing each of the points I've made earlier. So pooling resources, amplifying the impact, determining the root cause, trusting each other, maximising the benefits from networking, having an approach which is effective and efficient, being reliable, stronger communities being the ultimate outcome and common goal, showing humility, information sharing across the partnerships. If all of these things are implemented, and it's not rocket science to achieve all of those things, you will really experience the power of partnerships, effectively addressing antisocial behaviour and other community safety issues, leading to safer, stronger, sustainable communities. So thanks for listening.
Oh, thank you very much, Michelle. I really enjoyed your presentation. I like the breakdown of the word partnership, and I'm sure all those on the call, all of those points really resonate with us. There's a couple of things that I just wanted to sort of pull out really about what you were talking about. I think often when we're working in partnership, we forget that our key partner is actually our community. And we should be asking them what they need and what they want to enable us to make them safer, and rather than us doing to them. And certainly over the years that I've been working in community safety, some of the strongest campaigns that we've run have been around, you said that this was a problem and we have done this about it. And if you go back and survey communities when you've done that type of activity, they feel safer because you are communicating what you have done. And that's really important. So this is the point around amplifying what we do in partnership is really important. Obviously, you know, I've already talked about information exchange, and I think it's going to be something that's going to be featuring in all of these presentations and the broader conversation around partnership working, recognising that housing providers, many of you on this call are work for housing providers, are not a statutory partner when it comes to a community safety partnership. And you'll remember in the ASB action plan that was published last year, there was mention of trying to work through that issue. And it's even harder if you are particularly large social landlord and you have, say, properties over, some of our members have got properties over 148 local authority areas. So you might not know who to call. You might not have that relationship, perhaps between the housing officer and the police sergeant. So having something like an information sharing protocol that's recognised nationally would result in a better and faster and more efficient way to exchange information, and understanding that we are looking at resolving the antisocial behaviour as fast as we can, whether that be through early intervention and prevention, or sometimes having to use stronger measures around enforcement, but then communicating that response back to the victim and also the broader community. One of the things that we do as part of Resolve is a YouGov survey. And we've been doing that now for over 3 years, twice a year, where we try to ascertain what the public think about how we respond about antisocial behaviour. And sadly, some of the statistics, despite all of our campaigning and ASB Awareness Week, there is still over 50% of people do not report antisocial behaviour to authorities and agencies, all of whom are represented on this call. And when we ask how can we improve that number, 40% of people said they'd like to see more visible agencies, and that's us collectively working in partnership in the community, doing those kind of events where you walk around an area, where you talk to people, where you turn up to community events, to sort of build that trust, because trust is really important. Trust in a partnership is really important, that you all feel that you're working towards a common goal, but trust from the public's perspective that they feel that we are going to do something about it. A large number of the public feel that nothing will be done about the complaint of antisocial behaviour. And whilst we all think we're fantastic at communicating and we're great, our comms teams are brilliant at tweeting and TikToking and Instagramming and Facebooking and all of those things, only 5% of the public said that they'd seen communication about how to report antisocial behaviour. So what I'm saying to you all on the call is we need to get better about communicating with our communities about what we can collectively as a partnership do to resolve antisocial behaviour. I'm going to introduce our next speaker in a moment, but can I just ask you all, if you've got any comments or questions, you can always use the chat. My colleague Tom is going to be monitoring the chat. I think he's just waved. I know there's so many people on the call, you probably can't actually see him, but he's got a similar background to me, so maybe we might stand out a little bit. So he'll be monitoring the chat, and then we'll be able to feed that into the conversation when we get to the Q&A session. So our next speaker is my colleague, Hugh Ind. Hugh and I are trustees of Neighbour Watch nationally together. So I've known Hugh for quite a while now. He works for British Transport Police and he joined in June 2019. Prior to that, he was a Director General at the Cabinet Office, where he led on work driving the integration of the new style apprenticeships into workforce plans across the public sector. He worked in the civil service for 27 years and has significant experience in leading delivery of law enforcement operations under public scrutiny, as well as in leading policy change and legislation. He was Director General of Immigration Enforcement 2016 to 2018 and was a Strategic Director for the UK Asylum System 2008 to 2012. So I'm really delighted to introduce you, Hugh, and you're going to be talking about British Transport Police and partnership working. Thank you.
I am Rebecca. Thank you very much. My first test is going to be to try and share my screen, which is going to be interesting, but I haven't done that. I've done the wrong screen, haven't I? So that's I failed that test for a start. So I'm going to do it again.
That's okay, Hugh. I'm absolutely dreadful at IT.
Well, you know.
And I generally do
know,
the witty. Next slide, please. Yes, so you can see it, Hugh. Thank you.
All I've done there is just basically start on the wrong slide, but apart from that, it's worked perfectly. So there we go.
Makes us all human. Makes us all
yes.
human.
Thank you very much. Anyway, thank you for having me on this call. My name is Hugh Ind, as Rebecca said, and I'm the Chief Exec of the British Transport Police Authority. So our job is to make sure there's an efficient and effective police service for the railway. And I particularly just wanted to say a couple of things about antisocial behaviour on the railway, which hopefully complements what Holly and Michelle have said, because it's a kind of sort of slightly different type of location that we're talking about. But essentially, I've got to tell you who the British Transport Police are. So we're a national police force. We cover the railway in England, Scotland and Wales. We also do the London Underground, and then a sort of selection of light rail and tram systems you can see there on the slide. Not in Manchester, actually, Rebecca, but anyway, Glasgow, Tyne and Wear, bits of Tyne and Wear, and the DLR in London. Across Great Britain, got about 3,100 officers, 250 community support officers. So that looks like quite a few, but when you think it's spread nationally, quite often means that we are a kind of a minority partner in each location that we're working in. So when we come to talk about partnerships, that's one of the concepts we have, is that actually the British Transport Police needs to work with others to pool resources, just like Michelle said, her first P. 10,000 miles of track, 3,000 stations. So a lot of locations in which antisocial behaviour does crop up. On my next slide, specifically antisocial behaviour, you'll see the statistics there. 90% of respondents to rail staff talk about having experienced ASB on the railway. In our public consultations, antisocial behaviour is one of the top 3 concerns of those using a railway, and actually accounts for 18% of all calls to service for the British Transport Police. So that is the second highest type of issue that makes members of the public call British Transport Police. So it's pretty important for us to make sure that we get it right. In a more recent survey, which I haven't got on this slide, actually 70% of rail passengers think that combating antisocial behaviour should be the British Transport Police #1 priority. So that's 70% of all people travelling on trains. So what are we doing about it? There's a strategy. I'll talk about neighbourhood policing, because you wouldn't necessarily think that applies to British Transport Police if you're working with some Home Office partners and their neighbourhood policing teams in your area. But we follow the same principles. The neighbourhood, most easily, you could think about it as a large train station, but also there's clearly a community of the railway, of rail staff and others. So it is possible to have kind of neighbourhood policing principles embedded across the country, and that is what we try and do. I'll give you one example of that in a minute. But essentially that's the rail industry I'm referring to there when I talk about industry, Home Office forces, charities, any other local partners. As you will all know, at least as well as me, whatever location you're in, there's a variety of people who you can work with, and that's what makes the partnering so important. couple of things you might expect BTP to be doing there. What these partnerships sort of formally manifest themselves into is quite often as problem-solving plans. And in a way that police just like to count everything, there's a sort of competition about having more problem-solving plans. But I think the serious point of that is when you do get a group of people together, or a group of people who are interested in some behaviour in a particular community, then coming together to create a formal plan so that people understand what it is you're trying to do and then can measure its success is a key part that I think builds the glue of what Michelle was talking about. Of course, better engagement with groups, passengers and staff you would hope would go with it. I've got a few acronyms on this slide that I feel like I'm going to have to explain to you. But the next bullet is we talk about integrated security pilot. You won't necessarily know what that means. For us, that means there are so many players, even in the security of the railway industry. So if you took, so British Transport Police is clearly interested in the security of the railway, safety of passengers, combating antisocial behaviour. But there's a lot of security partners. I don't know how many of you use King's Cross St Pancras complex when you come into London, but essentially there's about 8 different agencies just across that fairly large set couple of stations who have one role or another in security on a railway. So, or keeping passengers safe, or some form of security, for example, in the shops in St Pancras station. So we call that integrated security, just trying to put some kind of partnership around all of those people who have some form of responsibility. The next acronym, RSAS, is Rail Security Accredited Staff. So the British Transport Police does accredit some members who work in the rail industry to operate some security functions. Again, part of the community that we will try and work together with whenever antisocial behaviour manifests itself. IAGs is independent advisory groups, just because I know I've got another one there, Rebecca. RDG, Joint Rail Delivery Group, and British Transport Police Antisocial Behaviour Commitment. So that's the rail industry of BTP having a commitment to ASB at the high level, which hopefully empowers more local partnerships and to flourish. So that's kind of what we're doing about it. But I told you about problem-solving plans. So we count, I think the number's gone up, but anyway, 54 of these at different locations across Great Britain, quite localized. I'll give you an example of one in a minute. All of the things that Michelle and Holly and you, Rebecca, have been talking about: information sharing with partners, in community problem identification, joint analysis of those problems, daily huddles we like to have in stations where, but maybe a more formal weekly meeting. And you'll see that there's a little mnemonic that British Transport Police use, possibly others, SARA, about scan the problem, analyse the problem, respond, what's your plan of action, and then assess, possibly the most important thing, come back together and then see, did it work or didn't it? So British Transport Police is involved in doing that in a lot of different locations across Great Britain. As I say, quite often we are the minority partner, so therefore it's like a real premium for us to be pooling those resources that Michelle said, to build the relationships that she was talking about at each individual location so that people can work better together. Can't possibly do it on our own. Got one example for you. Don't know how many of you know Newcastle Central Station, possibly some of you know it better than me. But you can hopefully picture this kind of thing would be happening at different railway locations across the country. There was a particular focus on the Sainsbury's within the Newcastle Central Station footprint, high levels of shoplifting and staff assaults. A third of all crimes around that station were committed in that store. So, but even if, I don't know whether that seems to you like a smallish location, but even if you thought it was a smallish location, you've still got British Transport Police, the management of Sainsbury's, Mighty Security on the station, Northumbria Police and Newcastle City Council. You've still got half a dozen people who need to collaborate, even in a relatively small footprint. So again, just the need for all those people to partner, to have some kind of systems commitment, measurement of partnering together. You'll see there we had regular partnership meetings. Actually, as part of that, all the stores and the station signed up to a business partnership Shopwatch scheme as well. So that was a kind of byproduct. But those are that's the kind of partnership that we're talking about, and all sorts of different locations across Great Britain that were taking place. I was going to finish, Rebecca, with a kind of plug for British Transport Police, because you've given me the platform. Actually, the last two bits that because I think people might have heard of 61016 and they know to dial 999 in emergency, but actually there's an app called the Railway Guardian app for train travellers, which is a really effective way of just reporting low-level information, low-level intelligence, anything that you're feeling, also getting some information back and some advice from British Transport Police. And our website, which is our version of Single Online Home, is also a way of reporting crimes or incidents that you don't think deserve an emergency response. But as you were saying, Rebecca, report it all because it helps people build up a picture. It helps us prioritise what areas to focus on, which areas possibly to develop one of these partnerships on. So I think I would say, collecting all of those small bits of information, whether it's via an app, whether it's online, whether it's using a text number, is really important to help people understand where to develop a local partnership. Because I think for the third time in this presentation, I'm going to say we can't do it on our own. British Transport Police is pretty small wherever it is, and it needs to work with all the local partners. Even when you just take one store in Newcastle Central Railway Station, you had 5 partners to work with, a team of 6 different organisations. So that's what partnership means to us, and it's why antisocial behaviour is really important to us. Some of the data I told you to begin with, 70% of passengers think combating antisocial behaviour should be our #1 priority. I'm going to leave it there, Rebecca.
Oh, thank you very much for that, Hugh. I think it's really interesting, when we talk about public transport and antisocial behaviour, many of us use public transport in our lives, whether that be getting a late night tram home or the bus, or getting a train to a city, and the numbers of the general public who are travelling on the network and then through train stations is actually phenomenal. So if 70% of people are saying that ASB should be a priority, that would sort of correlate with our YouGov survey, where we've asked the public, where are you more likely to experience or witness antisocial behaviour? First is city centres, often the nighttime economy on a Friday and Saturday night. Second is in public spaces, so parks. And we saw a particular spike during the COVID pandemic, where people were restricted in their movements and went to local parks to let off steam for their alleged 1 hour allowed exercise, when we know that there were many parties and illegal raves and significant antisocial behaviour on parks. But then third in priority is on public transport. And often if you are a passenger, you can't get off. If there's a problem on a train and there's antisocial behaviour, there's nowhere for you to go and nowhere for you to escape to. So perhaps the impact of that antisocial behaviour is significantly higher. I think for those of us who work for local authorities and the police force in general, and one of the things that has certainly over the last sort of 10 years that's come to the forefront is county lines, and how the train network is used by gangs when they've exploited young people and put them on a train for them to go to another county for them then to sell drugs. There's a lot of partnership working that takes place around that specific issue. So from our perspective, I think what we've tried to do today is to bring you different types of examples of partnership working, and to describe to you why working in partnership is so important, whilst also remembering that the community is an essential part of that partnership. Nationally, over the last few years, obviously we're in the general election phase at the moment, so I can't comment politically whether or not something is a good idea or not. But there certainly was the ASB action plan a couple of years ago. A significant amount of funding was announced, and the Safer Streets funding was specifically around antisocial behaviour and partnership working. And one of the projects, I did a lot of work with the Home Office on providing consultancy support to the areas that had applied for the Safer Streets Fund. And one of the pilots that had been tried was up in Northumbria. So it's interesting, Hugh, that you use the Newcastle train station as an example for yourselves. And that was very much around antisocial behaviour and public transport. And it was Northumbria wide, and it was a collective partnership of all of the local authorities and district councils within Northumbria. They initially thought that they were going to focus on violence against women and girls, but when they surveyed passengers using the public transport network in Northumbria, antisocial behaviour came out higher than violence against women and girls. So that's what the project was designed around. And it had youth intervention officers travelling on public transport, responding to young people causing antisocial behaviour, whether that be on the buses or whether that be at transport hubs. You often find that young people congregate at transport hubs, often not to cause antisocial behaviour, but because they themselves feel safe, because it's well lit, it's warm, it's dry, and there's often free Wi-Fi. So you would find large groups of young people congregating. So the project in Northumbria focused very much on talking to the young people about what was available for them. So perhaps a youth club or different youth sorts of interventions, whether that be through Newcastle football, a team and their foundations work through the Premier Kicks to try to divert young people from hanging around in big groups. And then, that's one of the things that Resolve are working hard to do with our lobbying, is to sort of dispel the urban myth that it's young people who cause antisocial behaviour. The vast majority of the cases that you will have in your caseloads as you speak will be adults. It will not be young people. But yet the media always, when you talk about antisocial behaviour in any newspaper, there will be a photograph of young people together, probably with a hood up, even though it might be cold, maybe on a bike, hanging around, looking like young people, not menacing. But that's the sort of like that media perception. We will be focusing on young people on Friday, on Young People's Day. And that's going to be an interesting conversation. So I just wanted to sort of open up the floor really, and to see if anybody had any questions or points that they want to make, either to myself or the speakers of today, or any points you want to make to the group. And you've got an audience of 109 people, so perhaps this is your opportunity to say your piece. So I don't know, Tom, how you want to do it. I can't see the chat, so I don't know if anyone's asked any questions or if you want people to put their hands up. So if you could.
Yeah, all been covered in the chat, but do post them in the chat, or you can raise your hand and we'll come to you. If you haven't got a question, we're also really interested to hear your answers in response to our own question. And we're interested to know about the barriers that you might have faced with partnership work. We hear a lot of stuff about getting information. Have you faced the same difficulties getting information from other agencies? What other barriers have you encountered when trying to do partnership work with other agencies? So please send in your thoughts, comments, answers, as well as your questions. Or you can raise your hand and we will take your mic off and you can say it to the group.
This is that moment where there's like everyone's frightened of speaking in front of so many people.
Or we can just pick someone randomly.
It's only squares on a screen. They're only faces on a screen. So do feel free to say something. I think from my perspective, certainly when I was working in community safety and ASB operationally, one of our biggest issues was getting information from health, particularly around mental health. We had a case in South Manchester. I used to be head of community safety in Manchester, sorry, I should say that. It involved the perpetrator had very significant mental health problems. She was a schizophrenic, and she was being managed in her property, in a community, in her flat. And obviously she had lots of direct neighbours, and she had some very significant psychotic episodes where she was threatening to set fire to her flat and was very abusive to people and very aggressive to people in the community. And we were working really hard, bearing in mind we were the local authority and Health are a statutory partner of community safety partnerships, working with the mental health team to try to get her assessed and perhaps get her into a more suitable accommodation. But I think you'll all recognise, particularly when you're talking about people with mental health problems, that the threshold for agency intervention is really, really high. So I would say one of the key things in your partnership is to understand different agencies' statutory thresholds, when they can and can't intervene. And understanding that actually for what to us is an emergency isn't necessarily an emergency for your partner, and doesn't necessarily meet their statutory function. So us trying to get information was really, really, really difficult, and it ended up the case went to the Ombudsman, and we had a maladministration against us because we didn't offer the complainants the opportunity to move although quite a few of those people have bought their flats. So I'm not sure what we were supposed to do, maybe buy the flats back, 3 right to buy. But anyway, what came out of it, which was a really positive thing, was a huge amount of training that went on between mental health practitioners and social behaviour officers, first and foremost, and housing officers, first and foremost in Manchester. And then we rolled that out nationally. And understanding about how to get that information is for the best interest of the person who has the mental health problem. And obviously it was in their best interest because we were looking to evict that person from their property and make them homeless. And actually what we really wanted was for them to be put in more suitable accommodation. So I don't know if I hope that perhaps in the sector information exchange around health and mental health has improved, but from the faces that I saw when I started talking about mental health, you were all nodding and saying yes, that is a barrier. So it's important for us to understand and recognise what those barriers are, so that on behalf of our members and the sector in general, when I go to these meetings with the Home Office, with DLUC, with the MOJ, that I've got examples that I can use and I can describe why certain things are a barrier to try to enable us to get to improve our response on social behaviour for communities. So I don't know if anyone's got a question. I was trying to fill some time while you all had something to think about to say.
We have had one comment come through the chat from an unknown user. It says, the main barrier is working with organisations that operate over a significant geographical footprint, who are unable to prioritise partnership working or do not do so. Too often we are dealing with residents who need to hear from their RSH, who have the powers and responsibility to deal with ASB, but their experience is that they take an arm's length view of it. I'm not sure where they're coming from or who this was, but any comments on that?
I think from my perspective, for organisations that cover large areas of the country, it's really, really difficult to work in partnership because it's based on personal relationships, isn't it? And knowing the right person to call, who's your phone a friend, how can you attend those partnership meetings if you've got 148 local authority areas? Hugh, you've got your hand up. Would you like to comment?
Well, it's the same point, Rebecca, but I think maybe just another anecdote. And it was, your request to have more evidence for when you want to lobby and what about it. But it's like, on the one hand, there's information sharing like it's really local, and that that can work because, like you say, people can get to know each other, and then they maybe have got an established relationship over a period of time. And then sometimes you talk about national data sharing, and that's a whole different ballgame. But quite often, what British Transport Police is involved in, and I think a lot of, from what you're saying, a lot of your partners here, is more it's not national, but it's not very local either. So my example is mental health triage cars, so for the British Transport Police. So the only thing that results in more calls to BTP than antisocial behaviour is concerns for welfare, about 26%, and that's quite often around people with mental health issues around the railway for whatever reason. And the police have found that if you partner with a local mental health trust, you have a mental health practitioner or nurse in your patrol car, that will actually save you an awful lot of time, get the railway running because you can have personal information of the person who you're dealing with, and they'll know what's appropriate. And this is the rub really, where, and definitely from the trust that they work for, they will have access to that information. But if you're traveling around, broadly the Northwest is where, somebody's one I'm thinking of is, there's sort of 7 or 8 different trusts that may be looking after the person, and through the good offices of the individual who I'd spoken to, actually they've got 2 or 3 of those trusts on board and they will share information, but then 3 or 4 of them won't. And it's just really hard yards that for every single interaction between one agency and another has to be sort of, relies on the personal relationships, relies on the formal protocols, and yet it's all about helping somebody who might be at risk of coming to harm on a railway and actually stopping a railway running. So it's just an example really. Maybe you have 6 or 7 different organisations that you want something that's not involving hard negotiations with 6 or 7 different organisations, but it's also not a national information sharing protocol. So how can we make those easier?
No, I absolutely agree with you, Hugh, and I think that's perhaps why we're saying if there was one agreement that all agencies had signed up to, whether they were the Mental Health Trust in the Wirral or in Norfolk, and that all officers, and this is one of the things that concerns me greatly, are all trained in the same way. So a couple of weeks ago, I was filmed for the College of Policing as part of their ASB training for neighbourhood officers. So all neighbourhood officers, whether they're specials, PCSOs, police constables, sergeants and inspectors, are going to be trained on antisocial behaviour. And one of the key elements is about partnership, and that's what I was filmed around. And I was saying to the College of Policing, surely what we should be doing is making sure that whatever's included in the College of Policing training is also included in the training that local authorities have, or the training that mental health practitioners have, or social workers, or whichever agency officers on the ground has, so that we're all aiming and striving for the same thing. And I think often, particularly in times of austerity and when there are budget cuts, rather than us working together more, which would actually be the response to try to save some money, we actually all retreat and focus on our statutory duties. And so there's a reluctance in that sort of partnership sphere, I think. So obviously we focus a lot on information exchange, but there's also some really positive aspects of working in partnership, and recognizing that each different agency has a different set of tools or powers that they can use, and that each complaint around antisocial behaviour needs an individual plan, and recognising the sort of vulnerability of the people who are complaining, or the root causes, as Michelle described, of the antisocial behaviour, and then working together to collectively come up with a response that will stop the antisocial behaviour, because that's what our job is to do. It's to stop it. And often I think we go down the rabbit hole of managing the expectations of the people who are complaining, rather than focusing on stopping the antisocial behaviour however we can. And often that means the earliest intervention. I mean, there's a statistic out there that's not really changed, and that's around about 70% of cases are resolved at first intervention. So that means us identifying what the problem is, working in partnership quickly together to identify the best solution as soon as possible. We use those phrases, don't we, nip it in the bud so it doesn't escalate, so not more harm that's caused. I just wanted to open it up for the last couple of minutes. I don't know, Michelle, if you've got anything to say, or Holly, if you want to add anything to the conversation.
Yeah, I think it's I mean, it's difficult sometimes. I think it's very complex. I mean, I'm just reading the comments, and particularly those who have, as we've mentioned, stock all over the country or various different local authority areas. I think that is a very tricky one, but I do think that, you know, then you go back to your operating model in terms of how you deliver your core housing services, and you know, there is scope to have in most instances, I appreciate not all, but there is scope to have a local officer who has the capacity to start to build relationships with customers. And I think we underestimate the dynamic and the power of that relationship that can play into these situations. And even if that local officer has those local partnership kind of touch points, that is helpful. So you can't clearly be on every strategic partnership when you're based in 148 areas or whatever somebody had said there earlier. But I do think there is still the opportunity for most RSLs and most housing associations to have that local connectivity with their customers, which can then feed into the local partnership dynamic. So I think the point I'm making is we shouldn't underestimate how powerful those connections are when you're dealing with antisocial behaviour.
No, I think you're absolutely right, Michelle. And I think one of the things that's really interesting, each local authority area, each local authority, each police force will have somebody who is responsible for antisocial behaviour lead. And why don't we have a directory of who those people are with an email and a phone number? Wouldn't that be fantastic if you could go on a website and go, oh, look, the ASB lead for Greater Manchester Police is such and such a body, and here is their email address. I am dealing with this problem. Please, can you help me? Because I think one of the things that you know, victims of antisocial behaviour talk about a lot is that sort of having to keep telling their story, and how the case is almost like a hot potato. So if you ring the council, the first question they ask is, are you a social housing tenant? If the answer to that is yes, you get told to ring the social housing provider, your landlord, rather than telling the person who you phoned the problem. So, and I think there's something there around how we respond as a partnership at that front door, and really we want the victims to tell us what the problem is, and then us go away and decide who's the best person to deal with it, not making them take ownership of that. We should own that as agencies. So yeah, maybe we should be asking for a national directory of ASB leads for all organisations in the partnership.
We can add that to our policy work, Rebecca. Before we come to a close, I just want to say it's quite an interesting conversation starting to take place on the chat. So we can migrate this over to the Resolve website. We've got a section called Ask the Network. It's basically like an online community forum where we can all continue the conversation afterwards. So I'll send a link after this by email, and we can continue having a bit of a debate on there.
Gosh, an hour's gone really, really quickly. I'm sort of probably quite notorious. You start talking about antisocial behaviour and I could talk about it all day long. Never give me a microphone. It's a really, really bad idea. Often my team have to practically force me off the stage and tell me to stop talking. I just want to say thank you very much for all of your time and for coming to our first in the series for the Resolve ASB Summit. We've got 5 more sessions to go. 1 every day and 2 on Friday. So if you haven't already, please register. Thank you very much to our speakers, Holly, Michelle and Hugh, for sharing your knowledge and experience about partnership work. And thank you for all of you for turning up on what is probably a really, really busy time after all the antisocial behaviour that was caused last night because of the England match. There will have been a spike. I know you're all going to be really, really busy. I hope to see you tomorrow at our next session. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye, everybody.